audio and visual podcast, a weekly discussion about all things guitar building and some random tangents as well, featuring members of the Guitar Builders Collective from all around the world. The Guitar Builders Collective is a like-minded group of individuals that have come together to share their experiences, knowledge and inspiration for guitar building. Each week you can join us in the live YouTube chat or catch up at a later point. It's also available as audio, where you'll miss out on seeing our lovely faces and some of the visuals we share along the way. You can also find the Guitar Builders Collective via our forum, over on Instagram, where we share images of members' builds. We've got a thriving Facebook group, and we do hope that no matter what your experience and knowledge is, you'll become a welcome member of this community too. Great. Hello, welcome everyone. So today we've got the return of Dave from Footstep Guitars. Hey Dave, welcome back. Scott from Bonehead Guitars is joining us again.
Aloha.
As we expect most weeks. And our guest this week is Chris from Garland Stringed Instruments. Hey Chris, welcome.
Hi everybody. Thank you.
I'm sure a lot of you will know Chris's work because a lot of people that follow this live stream podcast thing joined because of the Great Guitar Build-Off, and that's how I first came across Chris's work. So we're going to get into all that in a minute, but I just want to, before we start properly, I just want to go over a few things about the Guitar Builders Collective, because Chris Franklin from Franklin Guitars, or Chris from Franklin Guitars, Chris Andrews, in fact, sent an email round to everyone that's part of the forum this week, just to say, I'm going to read it out in case I missed something, for various reasons, but expedited by changes to internet law, including the new Online Safety Act in the UK, leaving Chris liable for loads of things. He's closing down the Guitar Builders Collective forum. And that's going to happen in the next couple of days. But if you want to download any of your photos, you can go over to the forum and do it from there. And I'd recommend doing that as soon as you can. That'd be great. There's still the Discord server. There's links to that in this video chat. There's obviously the Facebook group. Facebook group's really good for the kind of some of the things that the forum was doing. And then we've got the Instagram channel where it's mainly just sharing of visuals. So Corey from Saul Guitars follows loads of people that are part of the collective, and the collective isn't like a set thing. You don't ask to join it. It's just if you're interacting with us all, then you sort of become naturally part of it. He just shares images of people's work on there. It's a great way to find other people to follow. It's a great way to initiate conversations because you can follow someone and then start chatting to them, and who knows where that might lead. And then I'm going to make a few changes to this live stream. So we've got Simon from 81 Guitar Works next week, and then we're going to have a break for a month, coming back in May. And on May, it's all going to be moving to a new channel. In fact, I'll probably do it during April to a new channel. I'll put a link once this live stream's finished in the description. Essentially, it's a channel which is just going to be dedicated to the live stream twice a week or 3 times a week. I'm not sure yet. I'm going to upload all the past episodes. So if you've joined recently, sort of started following us in the last few months, we're on episode 83 now. So you can go back and watch those. They'll be uploaded as videos. You can watch them, comment on them, etc., etc. Then there'll be our weekly live stream. We're going to change the time a bit. I haven't quite confirmed the time on that, but it will be the same time every week just to keep it consistent. And as well as being the same time every week, it's going to be shorter, just 45 minutes. We're not going to have new guests on necessarily. It's going to be inviting anyone that's been involved before to come on and just have a chat about a topic. So each one will be topic focused. That will be weekly, but also daily probably. I'm going to set up a load of shorts. So if you want to see snippets of the past chats, if you're following that channel, you'll get a short, maybe 2 a day coming up, which are just sort AI edited highlights from past episodes. Hopefully that will be great. We'll see what happens. And hopefully, apart from the initial setup, it won't be ridiculous amounts of work. It will just be natural and it'll be more of a community thing. Fantastic. So in the live chat at the moment, I can see Eddie from Electric Lady Guitars, Devon. Hey, Eddie. And Curtis from Goth Rider Creations. Fantastic. So, Chris, it's great to have you on.
Good to be here.
A load of the things that I definitely want to talk about as normal is sort of your background in how you got into guitar building things. I'm always intrigued in your videos by the little things you do with small tools that are sort of everyday objects, the jigs you have. I love sort of staring at your workshop behind you and seeing what's going on there. Just off air, Dave was talking about a school of lutherie where you learned that he was interested in. So we're going to talk about that, I'm sure, as well, and just general acoustic building. But before we start, is there a way you could maybe sum up the sort of instruments you make, or describe what they look like to people that maybe haven't come across your guitars before?
Well, yes. I mean, they're all acoustic guitars, although I have made some electric instruments as well. But I'm sort of concentrating on acoustic. And I say guitars; they're not all guitars. I've made an octave mandolin and a couple of ukuleles, different styles of ukulele. But again, all acoustic. And my sort of unique selling point, USP or whatever they call it, is, if you like, to try and make instruments which are not just instruments, but they become an object of value to the person because of some personal connection. So although I have a sort of, I don't have a set range of models, is what I'm trying to say, although I have ones which are more popular than others. In fact, the very first guitar I built under supervision is the one that most people seem to like the best. But I basically give people freedom to choose what, sort of size, and we can design a shape together. Even I've done that with a couple of customers. But so generally acoustic instruments. I don't shun electrics altogether.
Yeah. I like the idea of the personal touch. I've also seen on your Instagram, or maybe on YouTube, sometimes you've delivered your good instruments to people as well, which seems like a great little thing that happens.
Well, yes. I mean, that, to be honest, most of the stuff I've built has been for friends, musical friends, or friends of friends, people I know or come across locally. I've delivered one recently in Germany, about 4 hours away, which we can talk about later. But yeah, on the whole, it's I'm a very small operation, and definitely not commercial in any sense. But yeah.
So prior to any building, then, were you already someone that played guitar or played instruments?
Yeah, I basically I come from a sort of classical background, if you like. I learned piano when I was young, and cello. And actually, this is one of the routes, or one of the paths that led me into building, I think, because when I was in my probably mid-teens, early to mid-teens, I was learning cello, but I borrowed a cello from the school, but I wanted my own cello, and my parents said, okay, you get yourself a Saturday job and save up. If you save up half the money, we'll put up the other half. So fair enough. And there was a guy in Guildford, where I was living then, who built viola da gambas, the old ancestors, if you like, of the violin family. And this guy built them for modern players, and he had a workshop in Guildford, which was a little up sort of garret place, almost up some stairs behind some shops. And he had all the contacts up in London, and he said he could find me a cello. And I used to go in every Saturday morning and pester him, not just about this cello, but I loved his workshop and what he was doing. His work was immaculate. He had all this beautiful inlay work on these instruments, and they were all built according to old methods. He didn't have many machine tools or anything, and I just loved the whole atmosphere of the place. I mean, I was probably a complete pain in the arse to him, really, but he was very tolerant and indulged me, and eventually I got my cello through him. But that sowed a seed, I think, in my brain about building. I loved it, and although I never had anything, I mean, I made a few bits of furniture, tables and stuff like that, but I wasn't really a woodworker. I did a tiny bit at school, but I've forgotten where this question came from. I'm rambling a bit, I'm sorry.
Sort of how you got into playing instruments.
Playing instruments, yeah. So yeah, I was
led into the guitar baking.
Yeah, I was sort of formally learning piano and cello, but I had a guitar, and I had one. We probably picked one up in Spain on holiday or something, and I just taught myself a few cowboy chords, and I could play. I was never very good, and it wasn't my main instrument. But but then then it sort of went into abeyance for quite a while, and then later on in life, much later on, I picked up bass, and I started to play bass in a rock band. I say a rock band, you know, it was a sort of mixture of styles, but there was a couple of teachers, and this was while I was in Luxembourg. A couple of teachers in the European school here got together and started playing, and we used to do gigs down in the old part of Luxembourg town, which used to be a sort of really rundown area, but over recent decades it's been gradually done up, and they've got all these clubs and night spots down there, and we used to do gigs there, and we just had such a brilliant time. It was such fun, that, you know, I just loved playing, and, you know, there were no egos involved. You know, we were just a bunch of guys, just having a laugh, and people seemed to like it. You know, I mean, the music was decent. I wouldn't say we're top class stuff, but and then I played, I bought a little ukulele bass, a Kala, which makes, although it's really small, makes a little bit of an upright bass sound. It's got these sort of silicon rubber strings, needs to be amplified, of course, and I played that in a jazz band, sort of doing, say, a jazz band. It was 4 of us, you know, it was not big, not like a big band jazz, just doing old sort of standards from the 40s and 50s, and that's a style of music I love, because my dad was a very good pianist, and although he was classically trained as well, he used to play a lot of Chopin and Beethoven, you know, all the usual stuff, but he also, because in his youth these were the songs that he grew up with and loved, and he used to play a lot of those, and so I was familiar with a load of the songs.
Amazing, yeah.
So yeah, so that's the extent of my playing experience, really.
But I like that your seed of potential building, or that interest in it, came from very early on of learning to play an instrument and meeting an instrument maker.
Yeah.
I don't think I was really aware people made instruments. I bought them at shops, or I saw people playing them, but
yeah.
the idea that people had made them was just sort of slightly removed when I was a child.
At the time, it didn't seem unusual or odd, but looking back, I realized how lucky I was to find someone like that in my local town. You know, it's sort of not too far from London, of course, and he was making these instruments for chamber music ensembles who, you know, big names in London in that, you know, very restricted market. But yeah, it was a stroke of luck, and you know, I loved the atmosphere there.
Yeah, incredible.
One of my friend's brothers made an electric bass guitar, and I just remember watching him do this, thinking, that is absolutely fantastic. I mean, that was just a simple thing in his garage, you know. I was just completely blown away, because as you say, you don't imagine how you can make these instruments. I'm just very intrigued, though. You talked about cellos and things. Why did you go into making guitars, I wonder?
Good question. I have to think back. I'd made a couple of kits. I'd made myself a bass from a kit. It was a carving thing, and it turned out, you know, it played really well. It was a great instrument, great sounding and everything. And then my daughter wanted an electric guitar, and so I bought a kit for her and put that together, a Strat. But it was, yeah, so going back to the sort of workshop atmosphere thing, I basically, in my probably mid 30s or something, I'd been on, I've always ridden motorbikes, and I was on a motorbike trip with some old schoolmates that I'm still in touch with. You know, I've known them since I was 16. One of them lived in Devon in the UK, and we had trips sort of every year, different parts of Europe and Britain. But anyway, this particular one was in Devon, and I'd read about the guitar making school there in Totnes, and I just said, guys, you know, I really want to go and see this place, because I was just curious, you know, and I'd seen photos on the website and everything. It looked nice, and I still had this sort of thought in my head about this is something I would like to do one day. And so I went to Totnes, which is a sort of quite a small, not quite coastal town in Devon, full of seagulls and a bit of a sort of hippie town, very, very nice, you know. So, and the workshop itself was in the sort of oldest part of the town, I guess, and it was itself a sort of listed building. It was a black and white, half timbered cottage type building, and the workshop was on the first floor. Downstairs there was a sort of music shop, and it was tiny, but you went up some creaky wooden staircase into this workshop, which had, I think, 6 or perhaps 8 benches, I can't remember, but quite small, and, you know, wood floors and sort of mud walls painted white. You know, it was really pretty unusual. And I just fell in love with the place, and I thought, you know, I've absolutely got to come here one day and just, you know, take in the atmosphere and learn how to build something. What you can do there, I mean, most of what they do is build guitars, and it's called the Totnes School of Guitar Making. But actually, you can build. There are people who built violins and mandolins, and, you know, basically any stringed instrument. But at the time of this motorbike trip, when I visited, I couldn't really afford to go there because it was right, yes, somebody's Electric Lady Guitars has just said Norman Reed. I never met him because he had died before I visited, but his then assistant Phil Messer had sort of taken the reins up and was you know, doing the courses, and yeah, so I couldn't go anytime soon after that visit because it was a 3-month course full time. I could conceivably have got the time off work as a kind of sabbatical or something like that, but, you know, that taking the hit on no salary for 3 months plus accommodation plus the cost of the course, and I had 2 young kids at the time, I just, you know, it just wasn't an option. So I put it on the back burner.
Were you living in the UK at that time then?
Sorry, say again?
Were you living in the UK at that time?
No, in Luxembourg. I've been in Luxembourg for, well, it's most of my life. It's coming up to 40 years, actually. It's
so it's just a holiday trip that
exactly, yeah. Because a couple of my old schoolmates have stayed in the UK, so we quite often had motorbike trips in various parts of the UK. So I put it on the back burner until I retired, which was about 12, 13 years ago now. But it was actually the second thing I did when I retired. I took early retirement, thinking that, you know, my time is more valuable than the money. You know, I took a hit on the pension, obviously, but I don't regret it at all. So the very first thing I did was to go and visit one of my daughters who was then living in Turkey, and I did a quick holiday with her and a road trip and everything. And then straight away after that, I went back to Devon for 3 months and just did this course and loved every minute of it. We had a brilliant time in the workshop. You know, it was a bunch of really good guys, had a big laugh. We all learnt a lot, and it was just a great experience. And I haven't looked back. You know, I came back to Luxembourg and took 9 months to build a clone of the guitar I built there. You know, I took loads and loads of notes, took thousands of pictures while I was in the workshop. But it took me 9 months to kind of build all the fixtures and get everything together to build a second guitar the same. And then after that, you know, I just branched out a little bit, but yeah.
See, that's one of the things that always struck me about doing acoustic stuff. It seemed like you have so many more fixtures and jigs and special tools that it's like a whole different world of tools and stuff.
Yeah, I mean the school was pretty much all hand tool based. So we had a router which you used for a couple of operations, and a pillar drill, so drill press, and that was about it. No bandsaw, no tables, nothing. And you basically, on the course, you started from day one with a piece of paper and a pencil. You designed your guitar, and then you chose some wood from a pile of different kinds of wood, and then with hand tools and some tuition, because none of us were expert hand tool users or didn't know how to sharpen properly, that kind of thing. Ended up 3 months later with a very nice instrument.
Wow.
So yeah,
I have to say, I visited that school because, like you, I'd sort of considered doing a sabbatical, but unfortunately, as you say, the money and all that just it was. But the one thing that struck me, I'd never seen a bending iron before.
Right.
That really fascinated me, how they bent the sides of the wood. Intriguing.
Yeah,
it's lovely to see it.
One of the things that Phil says, Phil, the guy that's now running it after Norman Reed, he said it's like engineering in wood. You're basically working to almost engineering tolerances with acoustics and probably with electrics as well. Your neck pocket has to be exactly right. You can't have any slop there. But it's like that kind of all over the shop with acoustics. And it's a good summary, I think, of what you have to do.
Amazing. So that first style, I think you mentioned earlier, that's a style that's quite popular.
It was
make.
Yeah, the guitar I had at home when I was first on the course was a reasonably sized one, a kind of a OM, I think, and I wanted to build a smaller guitar, so that was the one I designed in the workshop, drew it out, and I called it the Totnes guitar because that was the name of the town, where I was, and so I named the model after the town. And since then, people who've played it, they like the size. It's a very comfortable little guitar to play, and if you build it right, like many acoustic instruments, it can be loud, and it's got a decent bass for the size. It's never going to compete with a Dreadnought or something on the bass front, but it's got a good sound for sure, and plenty of it. So it's just a popular model. As I say, most people that I built for have been local to me, so they've been able to see and touch and play this particular model of guitar, so they know what it feels like. That one now showing, that's a tiny guitar. This was for a friend of mine who wanted basically a sort of travel guitar. So that is even smaller than the Totnes model. And it was made of Purple Heart, which I'm never going to work with again in my entire life. It was an absolute nightmare.
Oh, I'm going to ask you about that, because I remember in one of the Great Guitar Build-Offs, it felt like everyone was using Purple Heart.
Yeah.
What is it about it that puts you off?
It's a pig to work with. It really is. Well, at least, I mean, possibly with if you're building a neck or something and you want a laminated neck, so you're just machining straight bits of Purple Heart, then it's probably not so bad. But with acoustics, you've got to thin things down, and you've got to work the wood a lot, to get from where it starts to where it ends up. And the wood itself is full of, I presume it's silica or something. It blunts your tools like crazy. Right. It's very splintery, and it's just a complete horror show to work with. So the guy I built this guitar for has threatened to commission a double bass made of Purple Heart out of me, but I'm not going to take that one on.
I know it's exceptionally dense. It's really heavy stuff.
Yeah. And I think they is it Stumac or one of the big people have started torrefying it and calling it Royal Ebony or something like that, or Royal Rosewood. I can't remember the name, but yeah. Go on, Scott.
So all these different sizes, Chris, does that mean you've got to make a new set of jigs every time you make this?
Well, no, because, and this is one of the many, many good things I learned at the workshop in Devon, because they have to take in all kinds of people wanting to build all kinds of instruments. Their jigs and fixtures are made for flexibility. And right. So for example, the mold, the outside mold that many people make, you know, when they're building acoustic guitars, they'll make an outside mold with many layers of MDF in the exact shape they want, and then, you know, their model fits inside it. But then you're good to go if you're only going to make that particular model. But the one I found in Devon, and I stole the idea, and like many other ideas I got there, it's basically just a flat board with some upright bits of dowel attached, and these slide in grooves in the board. So basically you can configure it to for any shape you want and pretty much any size you want. You know, it won't, I need a separate one for ukuleles, but any guitar I've built on it so far has fitted in that mold. So I only need the one thing, and I'm short on space here anyway. I work in my garage, and I've got my cellar as a kind of wood store and parking place for other bits that can't fit in the garage at the time. But yeah, many things are made to be flexible. So you don't need that many jigs, but you need if you don't have many jigs, you need one that can do a lot.
Flexible. That's really clever. Yeah.
It's an important tip as well. I mean, sometimes jigs like that maybe take longer to make or cost more money, but what they're going to save you in the long run, and the ability you have of creativity from it, is so important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I don't mind making jigs. I never put much effort into them. There's a couple of builders I know who make. There's one in South Africa, Tunis Fick, who makes absolutely gorgeous tools and fixtures and jigs. They're nicer than most people's guitars. That they, in fact, somebody made a comment about it. I never put that much effort into my jigs. They're quick and dirty, and as long as they work. My career was in software, and it's a cliche in software that your prototype ends up being the thing which functions for decades. And it's a bit like that with my jigs. I think I'll knock something up, and if it works, then I tend to just keep it instead of making a better one.
Honestly, I've always I like fixtures and jigs, and especially if you've built something that is really going to be functional. But I kind of prefer them to look terrible.
Right.
Not necessarily terrible, but look like what they are. I don't know if I'd want one to look nice, because then I'd worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'd prefer mine to look nice, but I can't be bothered to make a new version that does look nice, so they never do.
I've spent a lot of time in the last year or so trying to make things look nice in my workshop. Like when I first set the workshop up, I painted it, had a colour scheme, and looked great. And then it's funny when I look back in old videos how clear the walls are and how clean the tops are. And slowly it's all become dirty and dusty, and a lot of the things that I hang on the walls are just nailed in and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've realised making it neat loses it gives it a nice aesthetic, which is different from the unique dirty aesthetic I've got. And I didn't want to bring it up, but since I've got the 3D printer, I started 3D printing jigs and things like that. And they look great, but there was something about all my jigs that I've still got that are made from old cupboard doors and scraps of IKEA and a bit of wood that I found somewhere that they work and they look awful. And that makes them more special in some ways, I think. Or to me, anyway.
Definitely, yeah.
You can always modify those old ones, can't you? If it's not quite right for the next project, you can just slice a bit off or add a bit on, and it doesn't really matter, does it?
Yeah, exactly. If you've made it out of cheap stuff you've got lying around, then who cares? You can mess it up or do what you want to it, and it doesn't.
This whole discussion reminds me. I had I'd made a fret slotting jig. I mean, way back when, and it had slowly gotten to where it just wasn't quite doing what it needed, and I built this elaborate thing with bearing wheels and all kinds of neat things. And ever since I made the thing, I've only been doing multi-scale, and I can't sit there gathering dust. But I'm still super proud of this thing, and if I ever get the opportunity to pull it out and use it, it's one of those things you can take pride in using that somebody watching wouldn't have a clue about.
Right.
But it bothers me that ever since I made the thing, it just sits there. And I've had somebody give me crap about not having a jig for cutting multi-scale slots. I don't know what that would look like.
Yeah.
And now I've got this thing sitting over here, and I clamp a piece of wood to the bench, and as a guide, and just saw a slot.
Yeah. Well, actually, talking about fret slotting jigs, that's another brilliant example of being flexible, and another great idea I pinched from the Totnes school. They had this jig for cutting fret slots, which basically had a sort of carriage which travelled up and down a board, and you secured your fretboard blank to the board, and then this carriage had a sort of slot for your fret saw, but it was infinitely adjustable, which means that's it. So you basically turn the handle, the carriage winds up to wherever you want it to go, and you measure that with a vernier scale. You could probably do it with some kind of, I don't know, laser pointer or something with more up-to-date tech, but the vernier scale works perfectly well. And it means basically you can make any scale length you want. And I've done ukuleles. I made the bed long enough, it will cope with the bass. But all it means is that you have to, obviously for any new scale length, you have to do the math and calculate all the fret positions. But I have a spreadsheet for that, and I've been refining this sheet over decades now. It's
amazing.
I basically, every time I've got a new model or a new scale length or something, almost every guitar I make, I print out a page which summarizes all the important dimensions and things I need to refer to during the build, and I paste it on I use magnets actually. I stick it up on my boiler, which is a tool holder as well.
Which I love. Yeah, we can talk about your boiler in a bit. I like the idea that you've got that record of all your guitars printed out as well, a physical thing.
Yeah. Well, actually, I normally throw the paper away afterwards, but it's in the computer, so yeah, I've got the record.
I don't trust computers anymore. I all my stuff was stored on 2 hard drives and in the cloud, and somehow in the process of backing it all up, like I would say 50% of it all just got deleted. It's got all these empty folders. I didn't notice it for months and months, and by that time I couldn't recover it all. Anyway, whatever. This on the screen now, is this the jig you were talking about that moves around?
Exactly that. And you can see it's really pretty, isn't it? It's horrible to look at. It gets worse the closer you get to it. But basically, it's basically a sort of cross shape of support, and you can clamp that in a workmate type thing or in your vise, and then the top plate, the bed of it, has just got these slots, and there are dowels with wing nuts underneath to fix them wherever you want.
That's really clever. Yeah, really clever.
So clever. Really good.
Yeah, I wish I could say it was my idea, but it wasn't.
You down the workshop then.
The thing is, you say it might not be your idea, but someone else, I hope that through making these videos and these chats, people get influenced by it all. Someone else is going to use that technique now, and they'll remember it from you. So it's like that generation. Like the other day, I was sanding in my workshop, and I was using a little stationary rubber to rub with the paper wrapped around it. That's your technique as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
I got that from you.
That one I think is my idea. I don't remember seeing that from anyone else, and I just thought, a rubber with that little wedge on the end, that's going to curl up nicely into a volute or whatever. So yeah.
Excellent.
If for anyone that doesn't know, on my channel a while ago, I made a series called Luthier's Lunch Break, which is this. They were about 45 minutes to an hour long. I think I was doing one a week to start with, then one a month, and each episode had maybe 10 or 15 short clips of different guitar builders talking about ways of building, tool ideas, ways of finishing, all different things. The idea being you could watch an episode and maybe it will inspire you to try a different tool, do something a different way. And Chris did a regular sort of 5-minute slot each episode, highlighting different everyday items that you used in your workshop as tools. And I mean, you never seem to run out. There were so many things to use. It was amazing.
Well, I was sort of scraping the barrel a bit towards the end, actually. I couldn't.
They're all great anyway.
Yeah. And I found it hard to keep it down to 5 minutes, as you may remember. I was, rambling on for 10 minutes often sometimes. But yeah, no, it's kind of fun doing that, to repurpose things, or when you're thinking about an operation or something you need to do, like say sanding, you kind of put your mind into what is needed. You need something which is, to take the pencil eraser as an example, you need something which is basically flat with a bit of give in it for most of it. But if you've got a curve at the end, you want something that will just bend up. And so you see a pencil eraser, oh, perfect, that'll do the job. And that's part of the fun of it for me, I think.
I do agree. Ben Crow using Allen keys to make little tiny chisels is
Yes.
my favourite thing.
Yeah.
You can make them really, really small with an Allen key.
Yeah. No, it's great. Yeah.
It's really good.
While we're talking about ways of making jigs, Mick in the chat has said, Chris, do you have any genius ideas for radiusing the braces?
Well, not really. No, nothing new. The way I learnt in the school was basically to hand plane them on a shooting board, and you basically mark up the length of the brace, and I won't go into all the details, it would be long and boring, but basically that was how we did it. And then again, flexibility, we used a flat board, but then stacked up little piles of veneer, different heights at different points along the drawing of the guitar where the braces would be, and then you could glue up inside that. So it was like having a radius dish, but it was on a flat board, and you only had the points that you actually needed to support the brace while it was gluing. Since then, I've sort of standardized, and I've got myself a radius dish. In fact, 2 of them, which I then glued back to back. So I've got 5 meters on one side, 10 meters on the other. So that's what I tend to use now. And that has simplified things a lot. I still, plane the braces roughly to shape, roughly. Then I put them, I sort of gang them up in a bunch so that they don't wobble around too much while I'm doing this. And then I sand them in the radius dish. And then normally I will go back after that and replane just 1 or 2 shavings along the line that the radius dish has created, because that leaves a rather rough surface. I've got 80 grit or something in there, and that's not really very good for gluing. A planed surface is much, much better, especially if you're using hide glue, which I tend to do. So having got the shape on the radius dish, I'll then take the hand plane and just take a shaving or 2 off without altering the shape, just to get a good surface on the brace.
Right.
I'm just was looking for your Instagram to see if there was a picture of that. There probably is somewhere, but
there might be. I don't remember, but I think on some of my YouTube videos you can see me sort of sanding the braces in the radius dish. But
so
yeah.
I was going to say then, I put a link to the Instagram and also the YouTube in the description. So Mick and anyone else, if you even just looking over your Instagram, you can see lots of sort of visual tips. But yeah, your YouTube channel is great for that. Hey, so that maybe naturally goes on to, when did you start doing YouTube things?
Oh, well, it was it was because of the Great Guitar Build-Off. I heard about it. I can't even remember how I heard about it, but it was probably through Crimson, because I was looking at Ben's videos at the time. I enjoyed them very much. And I thought, oh, that would be fun. And so I, applied, and I didn't realize that it was so much an electric builder's kind of thing. And I saw, well, I saw Mark's first video, which completely bowled me over. I mean, the video production was just fabulous. I can remember this sort of scene going in a garden, and he opened a gate or something. I mean, it was like a film almost. And then the end result, this wonderful instrument he built, and I just thought, this is, I'm out of my league here. Not only is the video making sort of far beyond anything I could imagine, the professionalism of the end result is also, just not something I can approach. But anyway, I thought, well, what the hell, I'll go for it anyway. And then I saw Gabi's first video, and again, really good, clear video production, nicely done. I thought, oh God, this woman is a threat, kind of thing, which indeed she turned out to be. But anyway, I went ahead. So it was just because of Great Guitar Build Off, and I'm not naturally a sort of performer. I say every time, and it's true, I at the time I would sooner have pulled out my own teeth and be in front of a camera, but here I am. So
I've got to say that one of the things about Great Guitar Build Off was that variety of people with different skill bases.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I loved. I loved the fact that there would be people that were new at making instruments, people that were more seasoned at it, people that were quite experimental, people that do an acoustic as well. I think that helped stand out when there were less acoustic people. It was easier to focus on one build and follow it through to start with, because there were so many videos on it.
Yeah.
But the video making, I felt, was always an element that maybe pushed some people away, or meant that you could make something great and you wouldn't be able to see it. But at the same time, when I first watched it and started following channels, it wasn't always the production that made me want to watch a channel or follow the video builds. It was often just the quality of what was happening, because even if it was a bit of a fuzzy video or the audio wasn't great, I'm not saying this was you, Chris, but that was
it probably was,
situation. But, yeah. You could still often see the talent of the person there, and that was always a brilliant thing.
Sure.
It opened up all of that.
And I think techniques that you pick up, that was the thing for me. I mean, there were ideas that came out of those videos that I'd never thought of, and it's
definitely, absolutely. Gosh. And I remember, Scott's early videos where he had Cortina coming in, and they were really such fun. They made you laugh. And
I really worry about that now, because people that don't know the history and don't know how to just see this and what the hell is going on. Especially in 2025 now, it could be labeled something else.
Yeah. No, but it was great. It made the competition so much fun, and actually, Scott, you were such a driving force and a help to people in that competition. You were, you kind of really helped it along in a very big way.
If you don't mind, Chris, I'm just going to share your a bit of one of your builds in the background while we're talking, just so people see, like, even there, you're just demonstrating
that does the neck angle.
Yeah. That's right. And this again isn't my idea. It wasn't also pinched from Devon for once. This was an idea I picked up on the internet somewhere. I don't know where. I would have credited the person if I could have found it. But yeah, basically you that swinging arm, you can just see I've cocked up the shot really, but that little bit sticking out is you can use to that's what finally measures the neck angle. But you set the thing up with your fretboard height on the bolt you can see nearest the heel, and your bridge height on the other bolt. You can just literally screw them up and down to set your heights, and then you just measure off the angle, and it's it's about as simple as it can get, and then you just saw it off on your chop saw.
That's amazing.
So look, I'll leave it playing a bit while we're chatting, but I've sped it up because obviously we're not watching the video, but we're not listening to you talking. But hopefully people just see how, and this is what I was saying about those videos, just full of tips, so much you could learn from it. And that first year, I wasn't taking part in the Great Guitar Build Off. I just realised some people watching may not know what that is. Essentially, Crimson Guitars during the COVID lockdowns set up a competition for different YouTubers to make guitars and make videos of it for people to watch. But what ended up happening is a load of people who weren't professional YouTubers wanted to make videos and join in and build along and started uploading things. And for me, that first year, I was just watching loads of other people building, and I loved it. It was a great way to sort of have a break from all the rubbish that was happening in the world. So seeing things like this, which I would probably never do because I don't think I'll build an acoustic guitar, was just still really hypnotic, really interesting. I loved it.
Good. Yeah. Well, I feel that I'm certainly no expert, but I've picked up things over the way, and along the way, I should say, and I kind of like the idea of showing it to people who are perhaps a little bit less experienced than me, and then they may pick up something helpful. It's not to sort of say how brilliant I am. It's just to say, well, you can do this, and this works, kind of thing.
So is this guitar we're looking at now, is this the standard size you were talking about as your main?
That one is, yes. That guitar is, I think, that model. Yeah.
No, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, God knows what I'm talking about there, but
so, and that is that the size that you've done for Garby?
Yes, it is. I talked to her about it because I contacted her initially just because I liked the idea of her project. I thought it was a very good idea. It also spoke to me because of my dad being such a good pianist. And I wanted to do something to help. So I wrote to her and said, love the project. I'd like to build you a guitar if you send me a top. In the end, she sent me a whole set of wood, but we talked a little bit about the size, and she said she was building a Dreadnought and an OM. And I said, well, I can, out of my standard models, for want of a better word, I can build you this Totnes model, which is a small guitar, or a parlor, which I've done 2 or 3 of now. And she said, yeah, that either would work well. She slightly preferred the idea of the Totnes, so fine, that's what I ended up doing. Yeah.
In case people don't know, Garby is the person Chris mentioned that was on the Great Guitar Build Off, who's an acoustic builder. She's been on this show before. I can't remember how long ago it was. A very funny person, really interesting story about how and why she makes guitars and what she makes them from. But Chris, was the one you're making for her, like a lot of what she does, things that she then auctions off to raise money for her school where she works?
Yes, that was the project. So she was building guitars to finance a grand piano in the school where she teaches. The old one had reached the end of its life and had to be thrown out. They bought a new second-hand one, which they couldn't really afford, and so she's trying to raise money to cover the cost. So she's auctioning off her guitars, which she's done before for other good causes. And so I thought, well, if I build a guitar, I can perhaps that way get more money into the project than I could by buying tickets for her guitars. And anyway, I don't need another guitar in my house. So,
but the thing about it, if I'm right in thinking, is she's actually using the wood from the old piano as the tops of these guitars.
Yeah, she's dismantled 2 pianos. She's a very versatile lady, lovely person. She's dismantled 2 pianos, the grand piano that was in the school, plus another upright, which is 140 years old. So she had 2 soundboards to work with, and she's got a whole set of guitar tops out of these things. And so her 2 guitars plus the one I gave her are all made with, so the tops are all made from piano soundboard wood, which is a good thing and a bad thing. It's well, depends how you look at it. The tops aren't, as she said in one of her videos, they're not AAA, moon spruce, moon harvested, this or that. They've got scars and, not bits of metal in, but the remnants of where bits of metal were and this kind of thing. So they've got character, if you want to put it in a charitable way. but they've been making music as pianos for years, and in one, I don't know how old the grand piano was, but the upright she took apart was 140 years old, so the wood is that old, and so completely well seasoned and used to making music. So it's a nice idea that it has a new life as a different instrument.
And I love the idea that it's also got that life of supporting its replacement at the school.
Yes.
The auction.
Yeah, exactly. And for that reason, actually, I made a little grand piano design on a piece of mother of pearl and stuck it in the headstock as a reminder to whoever ends up winning that guitar that's where the guitar came from, and it's also what it's contributing to. Because on the whole, I don't put my logo or my badge on the headstock. It's one of the things I like to give people that I'm making for the choice of. So as part of making it a sort of personal item for them, as well as simply a musical instrument, I give them the chance to say what they'd like on the headstock, something meaningful to them. And that's why on the pictures on my website you can see quite a variety of things on the headstock and the decoration generally. I do put my label in, of course, and
yes, I noticed that on Instagram.
Yeah.
Chris, I'm trying to remember. I think, did you have a guitar you'd made for someone where they sent you the design on paper?
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that.
Was
that interesting.
Yes. So this was a lady who she lives in Cambridge in the UK, and contacted me. She'd seen, I think it was my Instagram or possibly YouTube. Anyway, she'd seen some of my stuff and knew that I made ukuleles, and she played ukulele and initially wanted a sort of jazz ukulele. And there was a lot of back and forth with this lady. There we go. And it eventually turned into a guitar, but a small guitar, smaller than Totnes, and a 5-string one. There was lots and lots of discussion, but she not only produced drawings, she actually made herself a full scale model out of cardboard.
Oh, brilliant.
Because she's a small-bodied lady, and she, comfort is an issue for her with a big instrument. So she wanted something which she was sure she'd be able to play. So she went to the trouble and made herself a model. So I basically had a set of plans, and I just had to build the thing. I mean, obviously I had to work out how to brace it, and there were lots of details involved, but the actual shape and size was hammered out between us and ended up in a drawing. Yeah.
I mean, that's properly personalised, doing it like that. I love it.
And for her, she's got Japanese ancestry. She wanted a sort of a family crest. In fact, one from her mother's side and one from her father's side, in different places on the guitar. And so we talked about that, and I managed to incorporate those for her. So that makes it for her very personal, and I hope that some of my instruments will be handed down, from their original owners to their offspring, and become heirlooms if they hold together that long.
Well, there's something about someone passing on a guitar to someone that's very personal, but then if that guitar itself has got that personal element to it, of even the emblem on the headstock, knowing that it was made in conjunction with, I guess, like your original cello that you had made.
Yeah, I didn't have it made. No, this was a cello that was, the guy didn't make it. He just had contacts in the auction rooms and stuff. So, but
Incredible. There was a question in the chat from Eddie from Electric Lady Guitars. Are you driven to refine your current skill set, or driven to learn new things outside of your comfort zone?
A bit of both, actually. I mean, there's always room for improvement. Whatever you are comfortable doing, you're not the best at it and not as good as you could be. So I do want to get better at all the things I try and do now. But somebody mentioned 3D printing earlier. I think it was Daniel. I've recently got a 3D printer. I've got a little CNC as well, just a tiny one, which I used for engraving mother of pearl. There was a design on one of my guitars. The theme was nature's spirals, and I could have done this by hand, but it would have been very difficult. And I didn't buy the CNC specifically for this, but it was one of the first projects I used it for. And I've since, so I had to, kind of learn a bit about CNCing. I'm still only scratching the surface, and the machine is one of the cheapest, the smallest, thing from China you can think of, but it does the job. And I've more recently got a 3D printer, which I've only ever printed 3 things off, all of which are useful, because you look at what people produce on 3D printers, and they've sort of dragons and skull helmets and stuff like this. It's not really my bag at all. But I'd use it for I've made an adapter for my dust collector, which fits from one size to the other, and that kind of thing. And I'll use it for jigs, and but again, I've looked around the 3D printing scene, and people are producing in plastic what would very easily be made in wood, and I hope that I won't go down that road. And maybe in some cases a combination would work, that you don't need to print off a kilo of plastic to make a flat plate. That bit can be made of wood, and then you can bolt some plastic onto it for the tricky bit that you can't easily make in wood. So
that's a good way of looking at it. Hybrid jigs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems inevitable that 3D printing gets brought up these days.
Well, I've only recently got this thing, and I'm still, tinkering with Tinkercad, and I'm not going to be a major user of that kind of technology. I don't think I like hand tool work too much. So, but there's no doubt it's useful and very convenient, and produces a better result sometimes.
Have I misremembered? With your career that you had, was that in programming? Is there any sort of overlap with the technology or the skills or the kind of way of thinking that connects?
I guess there might be, yes. I mean, I haven't really come across it, because these days you don't need to write code. I learned COBOL and Fortran and all that kind of stuff. I go back a long way. So these days everything's pictures on a screen, and you can just pull things into shape, and then the code is all written behind the scenes for you. I mean, I have looked at what's it called? Is it G code or something? The actual, almost the machine language for the CNC, because I've had to add a pause, or make it go back to the origin or something like that. So I've fiddled around doing that, and I'm comfortable doing that. But there's no real overlap, I don't think,
right,
that I've seen anyway.
I always think about technology and what it will be like in the future for kids, partly because I worked in schools for so long. I remember, I can't remember the exact fact or the anecdote, but at one point, because my background's in arts, I worked on a project funded by I think it may have been the British Museum, in fact. And they were going into schools, educating teenagers into the fact that there are careers in the museum and gallery field, which aren't just standing at the front door or being the main curator, which is what everyone kind of imagined it was. And there's all these levels in between. And one of the facts they had was the percentage of jobs that will exist for people in the future. So these young people, once they graduate university, if they go for it, that don't actually exist now.
Yeah.
And the percentage of jobs that will exist in the future that don't exist now was pretty high. And I imagine with the sort of revolution we're having now with AI technology, there's going to be a whole jump now of new kind of jobs or new things that exist.
Yeah.
Even when I was at school, there was a GCSE you could do. So that was what the exams you do when you're 16, roughly. That was, what was it called? It was basically media studies.
Right.
But everyone thought that was just like a Mickey Mouse pointless thing to do to fill up if you hadn't got any idea of anything else to do.
What you wanted to get.
But of course, that kind of language that was there at the time probably can be extrapolated out to people going on and using social media and using the internet and things. But we didn't have the internet really pretty sure we didn't have the internet when I was doing my GCSEs. If we did, it would only be a few people that could afford a computer to access that.
Yeah.
What was my point there? Oh yeah, 3D printing. So it's interesting to hear that the technology and the coding and etc. that you had isn't necessarily what's there now, the way it's evolved so much.
No.
Yeah. And I mean, I believe you don't need ever to write code anymore. AI can do it all for you. And even where you do need
where is the fun in life if I does it all for us? What's the purpose of humans? I do worry, especially in the creative space. I'll be perfectly honest with you. I see that AI has got real value in perhaps medicines and I don't know, engineering and stuff. But when you put it into creative spaces like music or art, I just think, what's the point? To be perfectly honest with you, because that's a very human thing, in my opinion.
I don't know. As a programmer, I've always resisted using external libraries and all the scripting goofiness. I have a very specific way I like to build things, and I got to have control of everything. And I think that's one of the things that led me into software. So letting AI take over, I couldn't even let somebody I trained take over.
Right.
I'm not a control freak, but in this one little instance, this is my little empire that I've created. And me and my wife were talking about this last night. I see so many really interesting and helpful ways that AI could be useful. And somehow I think more than likely, or more often than not, it'll just be used for nefarious purposes. But I can think of so many awesome ways that it could be used. There are times using my phone, I just assumed Apple was smart enough that they had this thing learning my habits, and no, it's stupid. But I can see a lot of potential for things like that.
I've been doing a lot of writing recently, and I actually want to talk about what I'm about to mention with you in a moment, Chris, which is when I've been writing, there was a particular section I was writing about different types of oils and wax finishes, and I kept Googling to check which different solvent bases are used for different types of oil. For example, like Danish oil, what solvents are in that. And what I noticed on Google now, some things you do a search and it'll give you an answer, but often there'll be an AI response where it will gather lots of information and try and put it together for you in a chart. So, for example, it will say which solvents are used. It will say why the different solvents are used by different manufacturers and how they're used and the mixes. It was just such a useful tool for gathering that information. Whereas before, if I would ask what would be used, it would normally direct me to a page where someone talks about it or a couple of pages. But this way, it kind of summarizes lots of different things, and all the summaries would then have a link at the end to direct you to which page that information was sourced from, so you could then dive into it a bit more in depth. Not that I trusted, like with Wikipedia, I didn't trust everything that I was reading, but it was a really good way of summarizing some of these things, because what I found at certain points of writing is my brain just went numb. I've been writing for so long, and even the basic things that I do every day, I'd kind of forgotten. So I would have to have a coffee or a break, or just ask AI to jolt my memory. And I found it quite interesting in that it feels like the way I use the internet now as search engines has changed because of it.
I think that's a really useful thing for AI. I don't have any problem with that at all. Summarizing information and stuff. And as Scott said, so many things. I do worry about coding and things like that, because honestly, people maintaining these systems in the future just won't know what on earth's gone on underneath it. And
people won't maintain it. The computers will maintain themselves.
That's the thing, and we'll all be out of a job. But the thing about using it for creative stuff, let's say, for example, it's going to design, we ask it to design the perfect guitar. I suspect what we'll end up with is a bit like cars. Every guitar is going to look just exactly the same, because at the end of the day, there's an optimum design for a guitar, and it will focus in on that, and that's what all we'll get. It won't get the quirky stuff that we create.
That just put images in my head of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
You designed a perfect guitar? Yes. How long will it take? 1,000,000 years.
And the answer won't be a guitar, will it? It will be something random.
The answer will be 42. What does that mean?
Another 1,000,000 years. I just in February reshared a series of videos I made, because I'm not really making videos anymore, so I'll just reshare a series of videos I made 4 years ago that was called the A to Z of Guitars. So it was 28 days in February, 26 letters with an intro video and an outro video, so 28 videos. But what I did is I thought I'll just share them, but I'll just change them slightly this time. I won't re-upload them. I'll just use AI to generate new thumbnails for them and new titles to see if it would make any difference to the videos. So the AI program I was using to generate the titles stopped working halfway and I gave up on that. But the one that was generating the thumbnails was hilarious, because you had to give it an input. So often the title wouldn't be enough for it to understand what the thumbnail would be like. But because a lot of the titles had a guitar in it, a lot of the thumbnails would have someone holding a guitar playing it. But what was really cool is that guitar wouldn't necessarily have 6 strings or 6 strings that even linked. And the hands playing it wouldn't even necessarily have 5 fingers. And sometimes those fingers would bend in funny ways. And I was enjoying it so much that I just left these. For some of them, I left these sort of random images up. And even like talking about like an effects unit for a guitar, the weird images it came out with were these weird like sci-fi technology that looked like it was almost from the 70s, predicting what the future looked like. It was brilliant. I loved it. In no way was it succeeding at making an image that looked like what I was talking about. But I thought, hey, it's made these images which are really weird. Maybe someone will click on it because they'll think, what the hell am I looking at?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure at some point AI will not just generate the thumbnails, but I'll be able to tell it what I want to make a video about, and it will make the video for me.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure.
I think I saw an advert just recently where you could do almost exactly that. I think it was on YouTube. But yeah.
Hey, Mick's just put a quote in. He was at Tech Conference last year, and one of the speakers said, "We are no longer authors of code, we are orchestrators."
Oh,
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Bad news, Scott.
I'm more of a authoritarian.
Right.
I'm a dictator of code. An evil dictator.
There's something I want to ask Chris actually, and that is, obviously cello was your instrument. So are you ever going to build a cello?
I actually bought the wood for it many, many years ago. It's still up in I hang things from my garage roof from the rafters, and there's a box with some wood which I could make a cello out of. And I'm a bit of a tool whore, and when I see a lovely tool, especially if it's a good price, I can't resist buying it. And I brought this out just as an example of this point, but if I ever do make a cello, this was a tool which LMI I think was selling at a massive discount at a guitar show I was at in the States, and I saw it, and even though I've no immediate use for it, you can see it's a plane with a rounded sole. It's rounded in this dimension as well as the long one.
Yes.
I couldn't resist buying it, but if I ever get to making a cello, then this will come in very handy. So I tend to I'll buy a tool and then work out what I'm going to do with it later, but I can't resist a nice looking tool.
That looks like a nightmare to sharpen.
I haven't even tried to sharpen it yet.
I'd be terrified to try.
Yeah. No, sharpening is it's a whole theme on its own, isn't it? And people have come to blows about different ways of doing it. So are you a water stone or a diamond stone? I started with, I started for a long time, I used water stones, but I've gone over to diamond stones and what's it called? Lapping film on a glass plate now, which it works very well for me. And it's cleaner than water stones, which are just so messy. I mean, they do a great job, but you wouldn't think so, but I actually don't like mess. You know, you see my workshop and you'd say, this is a guy who doesn't mind mess, but it's controlled mess, and water stones are sort of uncontrolled mess. So
one thing I love about your videos is seeing your workshop, though. And in those videos you made for the Luthier's lunch break, you would focus in on, and I'll come back to it now, the boiler, for example.
Right.
The boiler is obviously made of metal.
Yeah.
So you've got lots of things. Sometimes you just glued a magnet on something and stuck it up there.
Yeah.
And it's just such a sensible way to hang things. It made me realise that I have got metal surfaces around my workshop, like my bandsaw and my dust extractor, my air filter, sorry. So now I've just got things like the remote control for the extractor is just pinned with magnet on the, although every now and then it slides off and then I lose the battery.
Might be a magnet, Daniel.
Yeah, exactly.
Magnet.
Yeah, well, that came about. It's a sort of combination of laziness and trying to be virtuous, I suppose. Because I'm pretty untidy in the workshop, I'm not very good at putting things away. I thought that if I had at least the stuff that I use all the time, so that the nearest place was also the place where it. So how can I put this? If it's easily reachable, so it's to hand, but I can put it away and it's still right there.
Yeah.
Then, you know, I'm winning twice over. I can reach it when I next need it, and it's not sitting on the bench, getting in the way of everything else I want to do. So that's what led to this sort of wall of tools on my boiler. And I've got other ones which show up in some of my videos. They're sort of hung above my head because the garage has got, you know, wooden rafters and stuff. So I put hooks up there, and, you know, clamps and things I use all the time are just up there. So I literally reach up and can, and then when I finished, you know, it's almost no more work to hang them back up there than it is to put them on the bench. So
have you ever worn an apron?
I've worn them, but I don't, can't be bothered, actually. I normally just forget.
This is what I loved about the apron when I was wearing them all the time, is everything was always on hand. But then what ended up happening is there were so many things that were always on hand in all the pockets that I was beginning to be a bit weighed down. And when the apron broke, I just never went back. So the magnets are brilliant for that. I've got little shelves all around my workshop that pencils go on. So wherever I am, theoretically, there's a shelf nearby with a pencil on. But what I've noticed is every few months I need to rejig everything because all the pencils end up on the same shelf. One place that they get used more often.
I do that with pairs of glasses. I've got, you know, probably a dozen pairs of glasses spread around the workshop and this office, and, you know, so.
I know what you mean. I mean, the worst thing for a tool, though, is to put it in a drawer, isn't it? Because you just forget you got it, and it's. So tools should be on the wall, I reckon.
Well, Mark just made a video about his workshop, and he, like me, doesn't agree with that. I know Adam Savage had a quote of drawers are where tools go to die.
Yes.
I've got drawers which are very organised with the tools in, that are, for some of them anyway, the drawers just come out. So it's like a little tray. I can take it over to where I'm working. Everything's there, and then the whole tray goes back. And it does contain the mess, because in my workshop, the mess is where things die. Like the amount of time recently I've spent looking for things that are just under a pile of mess. My own fault for being so messy. I'm not normally this messy, but
I've come to realize that if you can't find a tool, you find another way to do things. If you don't have access. See, years ago, we were still in Midland, and I was working out of my mother's garage. Dad had a radio alarm, and I used that thing for a lot of things. Since we moved, it got a little dinged up, and I haven't had time or expertise to set the thing back up again. And I found other ways to do things. I've thought about this recently. When I lose access to a tool, I just find another way to do things. So if I can't find it, there are a handful of things you just cannot live without. And I'll go search and find what drawer it's in if that's the case. But kind of out of sight, out of mind in a way, at least in mine. But I'm also like the last person to talk to about it, because I, for the longest time, just had a pile of crap just on the bench that, everything that I regularly needed, a dirty chisel and pencils and all this stuff was just piled up there.
Oh, we've lost Dave for a moment. Hopefully he'll dial back in. Chris, I want to just go back to what I was saying. I was writing about oils and oil and wax finishes. Yeah. I have been experimenting using some oils and waxes that I haven't used for ages recently, and I'm becoming more of a fan of using them, even on top of the paint finishes I'm using now. I always had the same wax that I use when I finish polishing, but I've been trying different waxes on it. I'm loving it. The sort of variety. Are there any go-to finishes you use on your instruments?
Being an acoustic builder, I like French polish, because that is the thinnest and, by all accounts, the best for the sound. You can polish to a pretty high gloss. It's not quite sort of that glassy finish that you can get with lacquer. And I have started using, for some instruments, certainly the back and sides, what's it called, melamine lacquer, which Gio uses on his electric builds. That's a very, very good finish, goes up to a high gloss, although I'm not sure I get quite as good a finish as he does. But so those are basically the two which I use. I haven't used oils or waxes. I know Gabi, for example, has stopped some time ago. I think she said she stopped using lacquer and went over to oil, and certainly the finish on her guitars is very nice. You can polish true oil up to a pretty high gloss, I think, if you've got enough coats on to make it flat to begin with. But no, I haven't gone over to those or tried them even, really.
Dave, I was just asking Chris what he finishes his instruments in, and he said French polish. What are you using on your acoustic to finish it?
I'm just going to use oil, to be honest with you, probably to finish some sort of finishing oil, or that was my idea. I'm not really good at finishes, I'll be honest with you. That's the worst.
Me neither. No, but I'm finishing is my bugbear. It's to me, it's the worst part of the build. Even French polish, which is quite an enjoyable process, to be honest. But getting a good result is difficult, and there are people, specialists spend their whole careers being, piano or furniture French polishers. That is their life. I'm nowhere near that good. And with the lacquer, it's tricky as well. For all that it's an easy to use lacquer, the one that I use, but yeah, it's difficult. There's no two ways about it. But I don't want to.
The lacquer you mentioned, is that a spray-on one or a wipe-on?
Yeah, I spray it. Gio uses the same one. It's chestnut melamine lacquer, and he brushes it. Yeah. Quite thickly, but then obviously flat sands it afterwards. I tend to spray it. I haven't got a big spray gun. I've got just a little what do they call them?
Airbrush.
Airbrush, that's the word.
Yeah.
But it's if you're careful, that's okay for a guitar. You can use it. I find it goes on flatter than I can get it with a brush, so it makes the sanding later a bit easier.
I have used a 2-part epoxy sort of lacquer. I think Mans, I think it's called, and brush that on. But as you say, it only needs a couple of coats, and you put it on thick. But there's a lot of work at the end. But it's reasonable. But the problem is it goes off very quickly, and it's very expensive. So
I've just, on the chestnut products, I've just experimented with their hard wax oil. Oil wax. And I'm not sure yet, but I think I love it. I've only put it on one guitar so far, but it went on because it looked like it was going on quite thin, but actually it was quite thick, and it seems to have a really glossy finish quite quickly. Although on this one I've sanded it to give it a bit of a more of a satin finish, but seems to not need that much work to get it up to a gloss. Not much work to get it to satin, and not many layers to get it looking quite thick. And apparently it dries really hard, but I mean, I've got to test it. I've just put it on. I need a few months with it.
Yeah.
It's maybe not as good as a spray on lacquer, but it seems, or spray on paint, but it seems pretty good. So I think I'm coming over to using oils now.
I just feel you got more control if you're either painting it on with your hand or rubbing it in with a cloth. So I'm sort of happy, as you say, Garby uses the oil, and I'm very impressed with the finishes that she gets on hers. But she must put a lot of layers on that, I imagine, to get that.
I think so, yeah.
But it's just having patience in that particular case, isn't it?
Yeah, I think almost, I mean, certainly for acoustic builds, I'm sure it's the same for electrics as well. Patience is what you need most of to be a builder.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, look, Barry in the chat saying he's made his own hard wax oil from an online recipe. How did it work out? Was it good, Barry? I would definitely say, Mick said he's been told oils are too heavy for acoustic guitar tops.
Oh, right.
I guess it depends how they cure. You know, I don't know the chemistry of how oils cure, but if it's kind of evaporative, then some of the bulk would disappear as it cures. But if it's more sort of cross bonding and just hardening, then the weight of what you put on is probably going to be the weight of what stays on. In which case you'll well be right. I mean, I do like French polish from that point of view, because it goes on very, very thin, and you know, the sound is not really affected, I don't think.
Of course, good point, because I'm talking about a finish on an instrument where it doesn't really make any difference how thick or heavy it is. But of course, I always forget, as Scott says, I'm a Neanderthal building a lump of wood, as opposed to the talented guys that you two are building your acoustic ones.
You leave me out of that one. No, I'm using the wrong wood completely. Mine. I just love experimenting. Just to see what happens when you use various woods. But yeah. I think
the ones are the open poured ones. You know, the guitar I just made for Gabi. She sent me a piece of oak for the neck, and I haven't used oak before, but this had, you know, grain lines like chasms in there, and it just took ages, because I don't like an absolutely high gloss finish on a neck. I prefer a satin, but it's got to be flat. You know, you don't want lumps and hollows everywhere. And that took a long time.
So can you use shellac like a sealer underneath, or is that also?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, yeah.
I almost, whatever else I'm going to do, I put shellac on first, just to seal the wood, and it helps bring out the figure if there is any. Yeah.
Barry's just said about the one he's mixing that you can adjust the blend to achieve different characteristics. You know, that's a whole nother direction that I would love to experiment in at some point, is making my own oils. Now I'm getting into them, and waxes, and having that ability to tailor it to do what I want it to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a whole nother ball game. At the moment, off the shelf, and there's such a variety. And just a plug for Chestnut, because they were really kind to me and sent me some of their products. They are brilliant at advising which products go with which, to be used in which combinations, and how to interact to get the sort of finishes you want. And that's been really helpful to understand how their products interact together, as opposed to an experiment.
I was going to say, one of the complicated things about finisher, there's so many options, and it seems like every one of them takes, you know, a lot of experience to really get good at. So it's kind of hard to pick something that's going to put you on the right track and you know, eventually get good at it.
Definitely. Yeah. And going back to Chestnut, I also had some really good support from Chestnut. I had a problem again with the guitar I was making for Gabi. Actually, it was totally my own fault, not the fault of the product at all. But after I'd put some coats of lacquer on, because I was in a bit of a rush to get this guitar finished, because I knew she wanted to she'd planned anyway to do an auction, a raffle rather, at a certain time, and I was under a bit of time pressure, and I was sort of bringing the guitar from my garage, which is cold and damp, into the house, which is warm and dry, just to get the coats to cure more quickly. And being an acoustic instrument, of course, the wood moves like mad, and sure enough, after a couple of days, I got a nice finish on the top of this guitar, but then these cracks started appearing. And I wrote to Chestnut and, said, what can I do? And was it this? But totally really helpful guy. I can't remember his name, but anyway, great support. In the end, I had to sand it all off, take the bridge off, sand the whole top down, start again. But it was my fault. So, it's a lesson learned. Put that one down to experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's a sign of what I say about a lot of the companies I work with or products I buy, is the support sometimes, or the personal service, or just the character of the person that's sort of presenting the products on YouTube or on Instagram, whatever, helps sell me those products a lot of the time, knowing that I can trust the product and how it works, but also get some support if it's needed. And which one of the things, back to what we were saying about YouTube, watching videos of people who, it doesn't have to be great quality video, but you can see what they're making is quality. You can see they've got the talent, so you can trust in what they're doing. So as that video we showed of yours, Chris, as soon as you're showing a jig, we know that is a good jig to use, because we know the end product's going to work and be great. Yeah. So Chris, before we go, what are you actually working on at the moment? Have you got a new instrument that we can maybe see on YouTube or Instagram as it develops? Or
yeah, sure. I'm planning a new one. In fact, I've got a couple of one of the guitars I made, which figures on my Instagram page already, the Nature's Spirals guitar. I made it probably 18 months ago, and it again has been kept in my house, and it developed a small crack just below the bridge, and so what I'm doing is I thought, how can I fix this, because there's no sound hole, I can't get into it to put a cleat in there, or to fix it. So what I'm going to do is I've made this. Oh dear, this is going to go on a bit. The guitar is based on Nature's Spirals, which in turn are based on the golden ratio, which in turn comes from the Fibonacci sequence. So for this crack, I'm going to actually put a surface cleat on the top, and so I've made this this thing here, which this will cover the crack and actually be let into the top wood. And this is the Fibonacci sequence, sort of 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. And so that kind of problem solving is interesting to me, how to make a virtue of necessity kind of thing. So I've got this and a small repair I've got to do before I go on to the next instrument. But I'm going to go exhibit in Bologna in May. So I've got to get another guitar finished by then. I haven't decided yet whether it'll probably be a Parlor or another Totnes, just because I'm sort of in the swing of building Totnes guitars at the moment, having done one for Gabi recently. So yeah, I will try and get back to making more YouTube videos. I've been a bit lazy about that recently, but Instagram is so much easier, and you can do it quickly.
I never feel pressure to do things that aren't what you want to do. I think it's
the
best.
No, it's sort of enjoyable. Sort of enjoyable.
We like seeing them, so that's great.
Yeah, I've had to change my video editing software too recently, because the one I was using for until right now, they've kind of gone out of business, or it just doesn't work anymore. It was Hit Film Express, and I don't want to pay a subscription for the full thing, so I'm changing over to DaVinci Resolve, and I've got to learn all that, so it's a process.
That seems what everyone's using these days.
Yeah.
Fantastic, Chris. All right, we look forward to seeing all of that. I've left, for anyone that's watching that isn't already following Chris, I've left a link to his YouTube channel in the description, and his Instagram and your website, so we can follow along and see what's going on.
I
And
must
there's also,
update the website.
do you know, I was saying something the other day. I think websites are a bit outdated for general purpose, unless you're a shop selling something, because most of what I would want to show people is on social media.
Mm.
For me, if I was to build a new website, it would just have a link to the social media feed, I think. And a bit of extra text.
Yeah.
So anyone that wants to join us next week, I think it's going to be the same time as this, an hour earlier, but I haven't checked with Simon yet. An hour earlier, because that way Scott can join, and I think Mark might be around next week as well, because of clocks changing, all of that. So it will be midday UK time, which is 7 a.m. Scott's time. Is it 7 you started? Yeah. But it might be an hour later, which is what Simon's expecting at the moment. So I've got messaging. But Simon from 81 Guitar Works, I'm intrigued to chat to him, not just about the guitars he builds, but he runs a repair service. And last year, he moved to a whole different city, sort of had to start again. So I'm intrigued to hear about that process. Yes, brilliant. Thanks, Chris. That was excellent.
My pleasure.
It was great.
Pleasure.
And thanks, everyone, for joining us. All right. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
The Guitar Builders Collective is a group of like-minded people from all around the world at different stages of their guitar building journey. You can join us over on our forum to seek advice or share tips on guitar building processes, materials and tools, or just to share your builds. On YouTube, we have a regular podcast of guitar building chat where you can join the live stream or watch back on past episodes. Our Instagram page shares posts of members' builds and links you direct to their accounts. And for those of you on Facebook, we've got a private group that you can join, share and chat along with. The Guitar Builders Collective is a welcome and open space for all, so do pop by and say hi.
That was good.
It was really, Chris. I really enjoyed that, and it gives lots of tips there.
Oh, well, I enjoyed it too. I was a bit apprehensive because, I've never done anything live before, and I normally take about 10 takes for every, thing you see on YouTube. So.
Oh, we're still live. Hold on.
I've often gotten